Hello, humans. There's a funny story behind how our guest today, Neeta Bhushan, came onto the podcast. It basically started with Hay House, a publisher, writing to us and saying, hey, we have a new author. She wrote a book called That Sucked, Now What? Would you like her on the show? I did a very quick vibe check on her YouTube channel just to see what she was about. And I was like, yep, let's try it. Since interviewing her and since reading her book and since listening to her podcast, which is called the Brave Table Podcast, her book is, as I said, called That Sucked, Now What? I've come to appreciate Neeta as an informed friend. I know what she's about. I didn't, starting this episode, rather than give you the whole backstory of who she is, I'm going to let you fly in blind just like I did with just a quick vibe check. I had a lot of fun with this interview. At times, I kind of was like, all right, you know what? Since I don't know much of your work, let's just see it. Like, let's do it on me. And we had a lot of fun. And I really am happy to be a part of her new book coming out, That Sucked, Now What? Which I'm fairly certain I have said exactly that way on this show previously, because we all know hard things are going to happen in life. That's a given. Your part of life is relationships. Part of relationships are people dying or relationships ending. Part of life is hardship and feeling hard things. And life so much isn't necessarily about avoiding hard things or doing hard things as much as what's your relationship to these elements of life that will come, that are guaranteed to come in your life. As somebody who's sensitive, that is often a question that is incredibly important to me. Is when the hard stuff happens, then what? And hopefully that's a question that we cover in this conversation you're about to listen to. That Sucked, Now What? Is available January 31st, which I think will be tomorrow if you're listening to this the day this episode comes out. And if not, I'm sure you can buy it anywhere. It's a fun read. She's a very fun person and personality, and I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with a new friend, Neeta. Hey, Neeta.
Hi.
Thanks for coming all the way from Houston. Is that right?
Austin.
Austin, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I'm going to take that over again. Thanks for coming all the way from Austin.
Oh my gosh, thanks so much for having me. It feels good to be back.
I have to admit, I don't know much about you. It was a complete vibe thing. So I forget who reached out. It might have been a publicist or someone from your team.
Yeah.
I saw the title of your book, That Sucked, Now What? Which is the mood I'm in lately. It's like I want to hold a ton of space for your pain, for your trauma. But if you're not willing to talk about what's next, I don't have the time to just be an endless punching bag or emotional dump site.
Yeah.
So if you want to dump stuff so we can sort through it, I'm happy, like as your friend or someone in your life. So I love the concept. It's like, yeah, that sucked. What's next? I think I've probably said your book title on the podcast before, just in it being kind of like, yeah, that sucked. Like, life is really hard and really painful.
Yep.
Now what are we going to do about it?
Oh, what a mantra.
You also had a YouTube channel, which, because my reading queue is completely booked, I have no time to read anymore. I was like, cool, I can do some prep just while I'm driving, while I'm, I forget when I knew exactly. I was like, cool, yeah, she's coming on the podcast. I think it was when you quoted Plato and then said, or was it Picasso? And then there's like faces on your, it was just really silly and fun. And I'm trying to bring a little bit more of that into my life.
Oh, yes.
So, thanks for being here.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad to add some more joy and fun and play.
So, I want to just ground you a little bit. So if you could close your eyes, I want you to think about all the work that you've done to get here, and that there's going to be thousands of really cool humans listening to this show. And unfortunately, you're stuck with this unprepared fool as the host, but that you are going to give the best interview of your life, and everything that you need to say, you're going to leave it out here for the listener so they really understand who you are and what you're about. And when you're ready, let's go.
Ooh. I love that ritual.
Thank you. It's a new one.
So good.
So Neetha, who are you? Big or small? What comes up when I say that?
Who am I? I feel like I am a ton of things. I am multi-hyphenate, multi-passionate, multi-dimensional. I am a mother. I am a serial entrepreneur, a lover of life, an adventurer, a community gatherer, a lover of humanity.
So what happened? How'd you end up here?
Oh gosh. So I'd have to go back, right? So going back to where I grew up, and I grew up in Chicago. My parents were both immigrants. My mom was from the Philippines. My dad was from India. And, they were the typical, like, quintessential Asian parents, tiger parents, if you will. And so it was a lot of, pressure in that way. And they just wanted to keep up with the Joneses. So, like, we had your, Indian dance classes, piano lessons, violin lessons, all of the things. I remember literally being schlepped to ballet, piano, Hawaiian dance class. I mean, it was just everything. And then I had to grow up fast. So at 10 years old, I became a caretaker. My mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I had to grow up, and I was told as a young girl, my dad would say, you're strong. You're a strong woman. Well, little girl at the time. And so this priming would then take me to about 6 years of my adolescence, my teen years, and losing my mom at 16. And then a year after that, we would lose my brother to sudden asthma attack. And he was a year and a half younger than me. Yeah, that sucked. And
no warning.
No. I mean, now that we're kind of 30 years later, or however many years, 20 years, I'm not that old. I'm like, how old am I? But we think, obviously, he was the closest to my mom. And so and I've sat with, healers and things in the past. And they said, well, he was so close to your mom. He wanted to go with her. Yeah. And so, but that was so tough. I mean, it was paralyzing to the core because it was shock. It was shock. It was literally a year after my mom died. And it was on my youngest brother's 12th birthday. So it was just like this overwhelming amount of grief and trauma. And, my dad was this Indian Punjabi dad that was a single father then. And in that time, during that time frame, to be an Indian Punjabi dad in a society where everyone's like a couple, you're kind of, there's this, we feel bad. And so then the idea for me and the mantra for me became, let's not let anybody feel bad for us. We're not broken. We are not broken. So this is kind of like what's in my mind. 2 years after that, my dad would get the diagnosis of his life, which was stage 4 lung cancer. And so he actually passed away 10 months later to that diagnosis.
And you're still 16?
And I was then 19 at the time.
Okay.
So 19 at the time, my youngest brother was 14. And so, we're orphaned, and I'm now taking the reins along with help from grandmothers and aunts. And honestly, I think the through line for me during that time, and you shared that you became a drug addict, I think for me, it was community that really was the, big pillar of support in that time. But my coping mechanism was overworking, overdrive, overdoing, overcompensating to prove that I was worthy, to prove that I'm not broken, to prove that we're not going to be seen as less than in others' eyes, right? To fit in. We were already culturally ambiguous. So people would always be like, wait, what are you? So it was like this very weird mystere. And then on top of it, imagine being like a teenager and people are like, wait, you just lost your mom? Like, it was the most awkward question to answer when you went to like, college, the college nights and you're meeting other kids. And I'm like, yeah, there's no fucking way I'm going to.
Were you aware of the wreckage and grief and turmoil, or were you just kind of like, I am just going to focus?
Yes and no. You can't deny, especially if you're going through a period of time where everyone's dying around you, and I think that if we look and see now, we can numb ourselves with like our phones, we can numb ourselves through so many different things and not feel the feels. For me, growing up without really a phone, growing up back then, it was so different. It was, well, I'm going to overwork. And I had to, it was survival between the ages of 16 and 19. I had to work 1, 2, 3 jobs to support my family. And so the mantra then became work hard.
Yeah.
Because that was the mantra of my parents. And let's do this because it'll make them proud. And so that got me to another 10 years of life. I went to dental school, rose the top of my class, all of the things, making the ghosts of my parents really proud. Until I would, I buried all of these emotions and locked it up, thought I was good, locked all of these emotions up in a closet until I finally would hit a very tumultuous rock bottom, which would be on December 31st. And December 31st, now a decade ago, so this was 2011, I found myself just looking at a mirror and just asking myself, like, how did I get here? Because at this point in my life,
what was here?
It was being in an abusive marriage.
Okay.
And it was being in an abusive situation and actually recognizing and admitting for the first time to myself that I was actually in this funk, this weird place. And when I recognized that for myself, it was, okay, I've got to leave. I've got to be authentic and real with the people in my life, which was at that time my great aunt and my other aunt, my dad's sister, my bua, who I wasn't really truthful about. I was obviously hiding, and I was so ashamed that I was in this mess and thinking like, how did I even get here? But I was so afraid of what people would think. I was so afraid that people would think I was broken again, right? That pattern that I experienced in my teenage years. Yet it was the first time that I finally surrendered because I had kept those emotions locked up for so long that it was now fully bubbling up to the surface of the grief, of the pain, of the just internal turmoil that I couldn't bury it anymore. It was like the rug was like this high and I was like shoving everything under it.
Yeah.
And, I needed to just pull the rug out and say, okay, here's all of the stuff. We need to start sorting through it. Can you help me? And that was me literally, asking for help for the first time. Because I couldn't do it alone.
Who'd you ask for help?
My brother, actually.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you told him, hey, I'm in an abusive relationship.
Well,
you got to get me out of this.
He actually knew the whole time. And it was one of those things where he knew and I was in denial.
Yeah.
I was protecting because anybody who's in a codependent relationship, you're protecting the person that you want to protect. And you kind of get a little bit isolated from the loved ones that are around you. It was finally when I said, okay, and he helped me pack everything, in my bags, whatever I could from my home that day out. He was like, we have to tell, this at this point, it was like my ex's parents, as well as my aunt, because she had no idea.
Right.
And this was the one thing that I was so afraid of. And I was like, oh God. And he's like, Neeta, we have to do this. If you're asking for help, let people in. And so it was like, all right, let this grief and overwhelm from like a whole decade just wash over me right now. And so that's the day the healing began. The healing journey began.
Wow. I've been in a physically abusive relationship. It's hard to capture how it happens because from the outside, people always say like, well, couldn't you tell? And it's like, well, not really, because with every situation, I mean, I'm sure there's some just overtly ones where you go, wow, this is fucked, I'm out.
Yeah.
That wasn't my experience. It was like, things happen slowly and there's always kind of a reason for it, and there's a justification. And I don't know if it's different in the body of a man, but so I wasn't getting like physically damaged. I was just getting like my soul and my spirit were getting tarnished. Because the bruises weren't, I wasn't getting broken bones.
Right.
But something else deeper was breaking, and my relationship to what love looks like was breaking, and everything was kind of falling apart. I don't know about you, but like when you finally leave too, that also rocks the boat. My leaving was not without consequence. My leaving rippled through my life for 2 years after that.
Oh, wow.
So
did you get a restraining order?
She got arrested, and
Wow.
I actually let the DA talk me out of it. And so I ended up in a moment with the San Francisco DA. I've actually never said this on the podcast before.
Well, we're going deep.
Yeah, and it was either the DA or an assistant DA, but somebody was basically like, "Are you really going to make me do this? Like, look at her, look at you." And it was kind of like this bigger guy, little girl, and yeah, that's what happened to me.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I think that, now, because I did get a restraining order. And I want to just honor you. Thank you for sharing that, because I think that for so many of us who maybe even suspect friends that are in these toxic relationships, it's so easy for people to say from the outside. And I think that, and I don't know about in your situation, but so many of my family and friends, like my aunt, none of them liked my ex. And it's so easy to, like say like, oh, well, we never really liked him. But then the other caveat to that was, well, you wouldn't listen either when we would try to even poke hints. And, I think that even during that time and after, when I decided to pretty much leave everything and that whole life behind, because I was a cosmetic dentist, I thought, I built up the ranks and did so well in my life. And I was like, yes, climbed on top of this mountain to try to get out of my, cloud of this grief. But in actuality, I was now swimming in it, because this is the first time ever that I would actually confront all of those emotions from, a decade's worth of just loss and heartache and grief and turmoil. And at this point, it was like mixed in with fear and PTSD of like, oh my goodness, like my nervous system was so unregulated, because for that first part of my life was just all, trauma focused, right?
Yeah.
In one sense, I was just in survival mode, which added to my layers of grit and resilience, which is obviously what I talk about now. But I would say, Neeta 1.0 during that time of my life would be like, well, resilience is you're building toughness. You're strong, because I'm sure all of your listeners have probably heard, if you're building resilience, that means you are tough, right? And that's what I was told when I was younger. And so I think that once the healing began, it started to take shape in the sense of, well, actually, resilience comes from the Latin word resiliere, and resiliere means to bounce, to flex, to actually have this sense of flow. Because if you take an actual glass that's made out of glass and you shatter it, or you let it go, it will shatter into a million pieces, kind of like I did on that December 31st. But if you take a ball and a rubber ball, bouncing ball, like we would give to our kids, or even a basketball, you let it go, it's rubber, it's tough, but it actually bounces. And so that kind of began the journey of, how do you actually build resilience? And from a way where it actually is in flow. And so I then dove in deeply through different sorts of alternative practices, from, meditation, yoga, breath work, to somatics, energetics, psychedelics, sitting with different people, kinds of people all throughout the world, and really got so fascinated around how leaders make decisions. And I think for me, it was to build my confidence again, because I'm sure for you, I don't know, but this was my experience. After that relationship, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how to date. I didn't know like what I wanted. I had lost so much of my sense of self that I had to like work really tough and like getting that back. And that meant, diving first, like head, like, deep into immersing myself in what are some of those things that really light me up and actually bring me joy and fun and play, because the first half of my life was so dark and heavy in this, contrast. And so then it led me to starting a nonprofit for women and girls confidence. And that began.
That's what it's called?
No, it was called Independent Awakening.
Okay.
So Independent Awakening was the actual name of the organization. And that started taking me outside of Chicago, my hometown. And literally the groups that I knew, I started to come out here to the Bay Area to learn more about nonprofit management. I took a course at Stanford, and this was still while having my practice. And that course would change my entire trajectory, because I think it was probably like a 3-day thing or something, but I was with all these big wigs who are like, climate change, poverty. And here I am with like my tiny little organization. And the professors came from Stanford, the business school, because they were talking about how to fundraise and how people do it at the business school for actual traditional companies and startups. And I'm like, whoa, startups. And, this was the mecca of it. And it just blew my mind, because from that point, or up until that point, I was such a perfectionist. Everything.
Are you cured?
I'm recovered now.
Really?
Recovered,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. I mean, it was a big thing. I mean, as a cosmetic dentist, you're working in millimeters, Sam.
Yeah.
So it's a thing.
Yeah, I still do. I'm getting better though.
It's a process, and I'll share some of my tips on. It's been an unraveling, I would say. I think motherhood definitely has expedited that massively.
I love the concept of resilience being to bounce and to sway. I hadn't thought about it like that. I had a mentor. The first part of my life was about getting really tough, right? Like I was like this scared, shy kid. And so I joined wrestling, and I learned how to fight, and I did jujitsu, and I did Muay Thai, and I took steroids, and I wanted to become this being that couldn't be fucked with. And, so I got like a lot of like mental toughness too. And it was a mentor of mine who pointed out and he used, I think, resilience differently, but he's like, we'll just say toughness is not a virtue anymore, because you're now able to be in unhospitable places. And my wish for you is that you become sensitive again, so you can realize when you're somewhere that you're not supposed to be. And so I feel like I have this superpower, which is that I can just bear down and grit and do the stuff that sometimes needs to get done. And in some moments, it creates like a heroic scene, when you overcome something truly hard. But like what I'm learning now is to try and figure out how to adapt that in a way that it really holistically serves me, because last Monday, I felt myself like on the edge of a spiral. I had spent a weekend with a lady, and she had a hard time being with me, right? I was like a strong personality, and I just felt like I was emotionally stepping on her toes left and right. And I left there with all that same conversation of like, cool, you're just going to fuck up any relationship you get into. And I went from feeling like I am the world's most eligible bachelor on the planet to it's completely fucked and doomed. My therapist, who's no nonsense, just was like, cool, let's do a cost benefit analysis of breaking down right now. Like, what are the benefits of you having a complete spiral mental breakdown? And stuff starts coming out like, well, you get to stop what you're doing, you get to drop the weight, and then I said, well, you get a really shitty vacation, right? You get to be in bed and be miserable and feel like a worthless piece of shit, but you are resting. And right then it was like, that's the payoff. I have been burning the candle at both ends, and to get rest, I'm willing to like nosedive into, because it's hard to figure out like things are going really well. What's the payoff to completely spiraling right now? The payoff for me was that shitty vacation.
Which is sometimes exactly what we need.
Right. So the idea of turning resilience into not just about what you can do, but like what you can weather successfully, I think is how like you could call it, like, not just can you get through the storm, but like can your ship get through the storm still seaworthy?
Exactly. Yeah. No, and I love that definition and analogy, because I think so many times, especially for men and young men, and I think the idea that, resilience comes from that toughness. I think that's something that's anchored in a lot of us going through early stages of like adversity when we're younger, or any athlete, being able to say, well, the grit to the tenacity to like hold on to something. And for me now, and what I've kind of the culmination of so much of the research that I've been so, excited about, passionate about, and obviously connecting the through line in all of my stages of grief and in the grit and the turmoil and the heartache. And when I actually wrote my first book, Emotional Grit, I used GRIT as an acronym: Grow, Reveal, Innovate, and Transform. And when that book came out, and mind you, at this stage of my life, I was, I'd done a bunch of research and had traveled to, all these countries, and wanted to do these non-traditional, completely, different ways of healing and alternative modalities, and, East and West, and a lot of things from my upbringing, where I was initially resistant to, because I'd probably grown up with it, having a dad from India and going and visiting when I was younger, but didn't really care because I wanted to fit in, obviously. It started to come back in my healing practice. And so the times when we were in survival mode, it would be every Sunday, my dad, without a doubt, no matter what was going on, no matter if my mom was sick or, she was in the hospital or what, he would go in his room and meditate for sometimes 2-3 hours. And, there was 3 of us when we were like growing up. And so we'd be running around, getting the mala beads from his like altar, running around chasing each other, because like that's what we wanted to do. And he would like come out, chase us, but then like go back to his practice. And so from an early age, I knew that there was this sense of spiritual practice, and we would hear him chanting, and we would hear him just be so focused and so dedicated. Didn't matter if he heard shit cracking on the floor or like us kids fighting. That was his time, and that was his peace. And so fast forward, as I was now starting to sort and connect the dots in my own life, there's a concept, actually, there's 2 really big concepts that I talk about in the book, and that sucked. Now what is the first part is the bounce factor. And it's a concept that basically came through because when I was going on my first book tour in 2016, I was here quite a bit. And one of the moms from one of the schools in Palo Alto contacted me and asked me, can I do a talk for their community? And I said, oh my gosh, me? Sure. Great. Absolutely. I'd be so honored. She's like, I just heard from your book from another mom, and I just have a question. Like, can we build resilience? She's like, I read through your story, and my kids, and in their classroom, they're having a tough time because they lost, or they've lost kids to suicide in their class. And can you just come and talk to us, moms, because are we doing the best that we can? Like, what can we do differently? And that question kind of stuck with me, because here I am talking about, grit and my first book, but it was as if, this next part 2 was coming up, this question around, do you have to go through really hard things in order to build resilience? And is it only that ones like us who've been through some shitty or sucky moments can actually come out stronger on the other end? And can it be built from a really young age, like these young teens, so that they don't end up killing themselves because of pressure and whatnot? And obviously, so that was stuck in my mind. And so the bounce factor now of what the download that's come through is, it is comprised of 4 parts, and there are 4 parts to actually bouncing. And it's not just the toughness or the amount that you need to go through in order to not break, right? But to actually bounce back and, in fact, fly forward after sucky moments. But it's the combination of, well, first looking at your upbringing. For this mom, she was worried, am I too much of a helicopter mom? Because a lot of moms, as you know, in that area, they'll probably call the teachers, postpone, the assignments, see if Jimmy can get a different date because they have to go somewhere else, right? Like, I was so fascinated about that part of the world based on this mother's request. And it's not uncommon, right? Because we want the best for our kids. And for those of us who are struggling to figure out, like, how can I make peace or actually increase my ability to have resilience after tough moments? Well, the first thing we want to look at is our upbringing, because in certain parts of the world, like, I don't know about you, but for me, I couldn't talk back to my parents when I was young. There's no way. Like, cultural nuances. How were you viewed? Were guys viewed differently than girls? I know in my family, the boys can do whatever they wanted.
Oh, in my family, men were the source of all the world's problems.
Oh, man.
So I was raised by a single feminist,
Oh, man.
so it was like very anti-man in there.
Oof. And it was the opposite, right? Very patriarchal, like.
I would have done well in your family.
You would have really done well. It's like, come on over. How were you encouraged to actually speak your voice, speak your mind, right? And in Jewish traditions, both the men, the girls and the boys get bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs. And that's your way of sharing a speech in front of everyone on your 13th birthday. That's building resilience, right? Yet in some cultures, like the Asian cultures, you're not allowed to talk back, even until you're like 25 in some cases in my household. So, then that can contribute to us not taking any risks, us, dimming our light, not wanting to leave a terrible relationship or leave a job that fully sucks. And then we get into, the second part is how are you building good stress? And when I talk about good stress, I'm not talking about, weathering the storm, if you will. I'm saying, how often are you actually exposing yourself to good states of stress? Because research has shown that if we are exposing ourselves to, let's say, for instance, cold water plunge, nobody likes it, but we know it's good for us. And guess what? If you sit in there for 10 seconds, maybe the next day you'll go in for 20, and maybe by day 4, you'll go in for 30 seconds without wanting to come out. And that's just exposing ourselves to that good physical stress. Well, what about with our emotional stress or our relationships? What about sharing a boundary with somebody that we love, or speaking out our truth and sharing that we were in, a toxic relationship, or maybe even telling the person that you love, I didn't really like the way you spoke to me. That really hurt. most of the times we shy away from those conversations. Most of the time we want to backtrack, or we want to avoid confrontation because it's too hard, or we don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
But that's usually, that's the second phase of building your bounce factor. And then the third and the fourth is your emotional capacity to feel. Your emotional capacity to feel, because most of the time we live in this, and even in my case, this toxic positivity of, and that was my coping mechanism. I'm like, I'm going to find the silver lining in everything. There's always a silver lining. I know that I was chosen for this, and I was meant for more. And, that became kind of my way of like very focused to get out of that tunnel of that dark cloud that I was in. But looking back, now it's actually like, well, actually, that sucked is not really taking us through this victim spiral. And the now what is not positioning us as we're heroes, but the bridge between that sucked and now what is the sharing of the vulnerability in saying, well, fuck, that really sucked. I'm so sorry that you're going through that right now. Or I'm so sorry that you keep attracting the same types of people in your life.
Yeah.
To really acknowledge that so that we're feeling seen and heard, because that's just what most people want.
So you have a successful practice.
Mm.
At some point you decided to jump into the work that you do now.
Yeah.
What inspired that? What made you know that I have to do this? Like, in your own words, what are you here to do? What's your superpower? What are you specifically good at that this space, this crowded space, needs you specifically?
Yeah, I definitely think that helping others recognize how fucking amazing they are just by owning their stories, just by owning, their upbringing, just by owning the different chapters and seasons of life that they've been in. I've been such a community gatherer and such a proponent for community for my entire life. Like, back when I was, a teenager, I'd be gathering friends around, even in the hospital room, to sing to my mom when she was sick. Well, most teenagers are probably like out drinking at parties and things like that, but we would get a crowd of folks just to serenade my mom or play board games at home. So that sense of support and community, I know how to gather. I know how to galvanize people to make change. And I think in this stage and season of life, I'm so committed to helping others, celebrate the duality of the sucky moments. But then there's also the magic in the chaos, the magic in the mess, the joy in the chaos. And now that I've entered motherhood, I have been able to embrace it so much more, because not just being a mom of one, but now mom of two, it's a little shit show. Every day is a different day. And it's also been the most radical roller coaster, because in a 24-hour period, you can feel all the feels all at once. But yet, if we kind of zoom out and take a 30,000 foot view, we realize that that's just the human experience.
I want to start gathering people together.
Yeah.
What do you do at your gatherings to make it memorable, to make it so everybody who shows up ends up leaving feeling like they belong to something, or that they know these strangers in a way that they don't know? How do you design your gatherings?
Yeah, so it's funny. I actually I have a whole 16-page guide on how to actually step by step.
Where's that?
Create your support soul posse is what I call them. So when you actually purchase 3 books, thatsuckednowwhat.com, you actually can get that for free, but I'll share it with you right now. I'll give you a little taster of it. So I think the idea that most people, when they are either looking for a new community or where they are looking for friendships, most of the time as we get older, we are busy and we don't want to put in the time, or we just don't have the time. And it takes effort. It takes effort as if you are dating a human. It takes effort. And so when you are thinking of building community or gathering, and it doesn't have to be a lot, it could be, call 3 people today after you're listening to, the show. And maybe it's 3 people that you actually want to get closer with. Send them a note. And many times we are missing the key factor. We're missing vulnerability. We're missing the art of being able to say, hey, Sam, we really had a great connection at that networking event. I'd love to go out to coffee with you, or would you be open to spending, an evening where I'll corral 2 other people and we would do X, right? And if you are somebody that, doesn't want to just have a dinner gathering, or you want to make it intentional, and this is to your point, your question that you're asking, is you want to go through, a beautiful container, and this is what I talk about in the guide, a beautiful container of time, especially now if, all of us are busy. We don't have like 4 hours in the night where you can just shoot the shit, hang out and do all that. But maybe you have 2 hours, and maybe you can do those 2 hours from 12 to 2 or 4 to 6 or, 6 to 8. For me, my sweet spot is like 5 to 7 because it's right after the workday and you actually can kind of, decompress. This can be an outdoor gathering. For me, in the stage of life where I'm in, I like to do, circles where everyone is being seen and heard. And so, you want to identify what container are you actually creating? Who do you want to allow in the container? What kinds of personalities do you want to allow? Because if you are, let's just say you want people to share vulnerably, you want to talk about that sucked, now what? What has sucked in your life in the past year? What are some challenges that you've been maybe facing privately that maybe nobody else has shared? And the idea of being able to go first when you're setting up a vulnerability container is to make people feel safe. So you can do this by having maybe trays of food if you're going to, arrange this at your house, or, another great place is to have it at a restaurant, but maybe you can take the extra step and have little note cards written out. And where everyone's sitting down, everyone gets a little note card, and it's elevating that experience, because if you're going to be intentional and very careful in creating and fostering the juiciness that can come up, or the magic that can come up, then we've got to think, well, who and what do we want to call into the circle? Which is why I say we can sit in a circle, because why? Well, I would say that, in ancient times, or even ancestrally, our ancestors would sit in circle. They would sing, they would share, they would go around and tell stories, right? And usually why? Because you're kind of around a fireplace or something like that, fire outside. And it's our way to actually see each other, see whoever is in the circle, but also honor them and what they're actually bringing in. And you also want to make sure, this is the other tip that I'll give, is you want to make sure that while you are the gatherer, or while you are the creator of this experience, you don't want to be, this is not like a lecture and it's not, your time to shine. You want to hear from everyone. And so to be able to create a container where, hey, we're going to go around, and maybe you start with a question card like I shared, or maybe there's a few prompts that you create beforehand, or maybe you kind of like do it popcorn style where one person's sharing and another person's sharing. And so the beauty of these gatherings is there's a start time and there's an end time. And we want to make sure that the start time and the end time is obviously respected, because you want to make sure you're honoring their time that they're committing to this. And perhaps maybe there's a ritual that you start out with. Like you started us out today with a very beautiful opening, and I love that. And I do that on my show as well, is whatever is meant to occur, and be shared, let it be shared in this container. So you already set the tone even before you started this. where I felt immediately grounded. I felt immediately just drawn into you, your essence, your presence, and the way that you share. But then also at the end, perhaps maybe, there's a closing ritual or maybe something to close the space. So I think that those are, just a few to get started in creating a container.
Putting on your coach hat for a second, because I want to see that side of you. I know you coach workshops, right?
I do.
You gather people, you have clients. Just to give people a flavor of what your methods are and how that looks. What would you say to somebody like me, where I am kicking ass in a ton of areas? I've had this new thing pop up, and all the voices are popping up that all my relationships are going to fail. That people fall in love with me very easily, but then 2 years later they're just have gone mad, at how hard I am to be with. So I'm experiencing these, like, what I think is a form of self-sabotage, which is someone who I think is awesome, who is interesting to me, just kind of express interest. And I went through this crazy spiral 2 days ago. And that's on the heels of this thing that happened a week before. So it's very active in me. There's a huge opportunity, like, to recognize this thing that's activated and to start working on it. Where would you start to approach something like that?
Well, I would just start by asking you a question. How often do you feel that way?
Yeah, so I think it comes up when there's a little space in my heart to explore intimacy. So when I'm just like, yep, you know what, I'm 33, I'm just going to give this year to myself and not date, right? That was my plan for 33.
Yay.
This is just going to be Sam's Jesus year. That's what they call 33.
It's true. Yeah. It's very true. Yeah.
I'm going to kick ass and do all this stuff, which I am doing. And then, of course, the gods hate my plans. So of course the second I'm like, yeah, this is my year, it's like my heart has a little bit of room that I didn't know it had. If I'm considering dating someone who doesn't make me nervous, all is well, and we can have a very fun time together. But if I consider dating somebody who's kind of like a stretch, someone who's really living large and living full and doing the things that they want to do in life and showing up in integrity, the fear for me is like, there's no way I could match that. Like I'm not enough for that. The second I start to consider that, rather than being here in 2022, I'm in like 2024 when they're sick of me, right? And when all my character defects and my inflexibility and weird quirks and need for the dishes to be washed a certain way and the towels to be hung up a certain way have gotten in the way. And so there's this giant gap between where I'm living and where I am. And it's like, I wish I could just say, yeah, I'm just going to get present and it would go away. But I guess what I'm looking for is the willingness to go up against those thoughts. Right, like not to, because I think what's happening is that I want to just cave, right, and just go, well, I'm not ready for this. Maybe the next time there's a tournament or a chance to compete in life, maybe I'll be ready then, rather than to test my mettle now and see if I'm up for something.
I love the awareness that you're bringing to that, because I think that's so powerful. And I'm curious, when you're starting to project this idea of, well, it's not going to work, it would never work, and, kind of going into that spiral, is there something that triggers that feeling?
I think that the trigger is a sense of like inadequacy, like some comparison and just not seeing us at the same level.
And can you recall a time when you felt inadequate?
Until like 11 years ago, 10 years ago, I felt inadequate my whole life. I felt small. I was terrified of people. I felt weak. I thought I was like just less than for like a majority Like, you don't tattoo well made on your hands for no reason,
I saw
you know?
that. I love it. Mm. Yeah.
So not being inadequate is like, my whole life has been inadequacy.
What would it look like for you to feel fully well made and fully adequate? And being with someone that is so on their game and also so wants to be with you and so sees your light and so sees the magnetism that you bring, the radiance that you bring to a room. How would that make you feel?
I think that would look like being willing to try. Because once I'm in, this is a terrible word for it. Once I'm in a competition, once I'm in the tournament, I'm good. I want to win at all costs, and I will do what is necessary. But there's this like performance anxiety that happens beforehand, where I just gave a talk to 1,300 people, and I'm calling the promoter like 2 weeks before, like, yeah, let's just cancel. Like, mine's during the lunch block. Everyone's going to want to eat. Like, let's just cancel it. And he's going, no, dude, it's too late. You don't get to cancel it. And of course, I go out there and I killed it. I mean, I absolutely killed it. I can say that now. The immediately after, and then the next 2 days after, I was like, that was awful.
Yeah.
But I just rewatched the replay, and I'm like, this is amazing. But I wrote in my journal, like, don't forget, this is the talk you tried to cancel. And so it's just like pre-performance anxiety, where I'm like some deep fear of failing, some deep fear of, in trying, something horrible will happen, right? Rather than, oh, this is just, win or learn. Like, just go out there and, like, either you win or you learn, which is how I would like to approach things. But there's this really powerful sense of, just by trying, something irreparably bad will happen.
And let's play it out. What if something bad does happen? Then what?
In the arena of love, I'll get really hurt. I've kind of like, heartache is very destabilizing for me, so I worry about letting down my business partners and investors and the people who believe in me. So there's like a fear of it hurting other areas of my life. It will set me back, right? Like, I'm notoriously slow at recovering from heartache. So it feels like, oh, well, I will have to wait until I can date again. Those are kind of the top three that pop up.
Yeah. And so what if the opposite would be true?
I would very much like that. I would like to land on a relationship that I love.
How are you when you are fully in your power and you feel fully seen, fully adequate in a relationship?
There's a word that you just said that's going to like make me a little emotional, which is like I really want to be understood, because I'm weird, and like, I truly believe there is a better way to I don't know, water the plants, or I have like these weird particulars.
What are some of them?
There's a correct way to make the bed, right? Always turn down, not this weird thing where you don't, like, the bed should always be turned down, like a
What?
like a hotel, where the
Oh yeah,
where you do
okay,
that
okay.
last fold.
Yes, the last fold.
And
I like that. Okay. 2 pillows or one?
Well, the throw pillows have to go back on the bed afterwards.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And
Okay.
a body pillow has to go across the pillows so the dog won't lay on the pillows.
Got it.
So the dog can like lay on the body pillows, because I have a misbehaved dog.
Okay.
But like, historically, I drive people fucking mad. I believe that when I'm with the right person, I probably won't drive her mad.
No, because she would love all of those things about you.
Yeah. But there's this fear where it's like, I think I present as a good package, and then there's this disbelief when people tell me they're interested in me, because my history looks like, yeah, of course you're like smitten with me, but then slowly and surely you're going to get tired of my shit, because it's like it's not stuff I can turn off. So it's like these cute little quirks now, but soon there'll be giant resentments.
And that's the beauty with the right person, obviously, right? With that right person, there will be that dance. Yeah. There will be that flow and that resilience of the flow of the dance, where you both are in motion, moving to really kind of mold and figure out what works well for you and what are the unapologetic aspects of you that are like, okay, I can dance with that, to the other side of perhaps maybe there are things that are quirks about her that you'll flow and dance with, but we get to do that relationally in a relationship. And I want to just kind of challenge you in this way of, instead of thinking, and perhaps maybe we could do this for 30 days. You can text me later.
Okay.
Let me know 30 days from now. But the next time you, perhaps maybe it's, and I'll share with you, I did something when I was doing my 60 days of dating after I had done all of this work and sat in all.
Is this captured somewhere?
This is
on YouTube?
This is not a, I might have shared it on the podcast on the Brave Table. I probably have shared it in some of the episodes where I think I had like a spreadsheet of.
Are you an analyzer?
I was, remember, recovering perfectionist, right? And so I had a spreadsheet and I would rate the guys that I would go on dates with from 0 to 10. And it was like on the weirdest things, like they're 0 to 10 on spirituality, 0 to 10 on like, growth, 0 to 10 on what spiritual books they had read, 0 to 10 on, countries that they've been to, like how cultured they are, how traveled they are, like all of these, small things. It's not what you would see at like, Love is Blind, or I don't know, any of the other like Netflix shows. And I was getting a lot of 10s. And I was like, wait, but I'm not feeling like I'm not feeling anything for any of these people. And I'm like, they're great guys, but I'm like, what is going on? And a friend of mine was like, Neeta, because you're treating it like a freaking spreadsheet. Like, why are you putting your researcher hat on? And so funny enough, my husband never made the spreadsheet.
You never?
No.
How would he do theoretically on the spreadsheet?
He probably he probably wouldn't have made it. He probably wouldn't have made it. That. There's a few categories he'd be like, okay, 10's in, and there are things that, and I think looking back, it's like the universe,
made you ditch it before.
Well, yeah. Yes, and or like realizing like you could have all of the creme de la creme at 10's, but you're not really feeling that human connection. And you're not allowing yourself to feel, because part of you is still afraid. Part of you is still scared.
Terrified. Yeah.
Terrified. And so I would only, and I don't know if this is you, but I would only let people in to a certain point, because I would like to think that I'm an extrovert and I'm very warm as a human being. And so I do let people in, but when it's of the heart, especially in that time of my life, it would stop at a point. And mostly everyone would get like friend zone, because again, I was so terrified. I was fearful. And then I had to, and these are the two things that I want to kind of pass on to you, is I had to still sit in the suck. I had to still sit in the suck of like, okay, what is coming up right now? And this is like this is an awareness exercise, but what's coming up right now of where am I still feeling like I'm not enough? Where am I still feeling that this is going to not ever work out, or that person's going to treat me badly, or whatever? What part of little Neeta did I still need to heal? Or what part of little Neeta was coming up where I have to put my hand over my heart and say, okay, I've got her. Because we don't need to react that way anymore. Our nervous system is good. We are good. She's coming up because she is still scared, and she's there, and she's still part of me. Yet I know that the Neeta who I've become and where I want to go and who I want to attract is going to take care of the little girl that had to fend for herself and survive all those years. And in that, then I ask these two questions. Well, if I want somebody who's honest, I fucking have to be honest. If I want somebody who's vulnerable, then I have to lead the way. It's kind of the same thing when you want to create a community. You got to lead the way. You got to go first. So it's the same thing in these interpersonal relationships, whether it's friendships or even love. It's like, hey, I want to do this thing. I don't know where it's going to go, but this is all of me. And if you're ready, let's go.
Yeah.
Like, let's drop in. And I think a lot of times we, of course, have these expectations in our mind as to why, or like think 20 steps ahead. But I want to, circle back to it with you of, little Sam is going to come up, in many ways, in the many women that you will date in your year of 33. Jesus year. Every time that happens, every time you get triggered or there is a spiral, I want you to ask yourself, okay, what part of little Sam needs to feel understood or needs to remember that he's well made? And there are ways to, and in somatic practices, there are ways to reduce our anxiety levels. There are ways to reduce and calm our nervous system when we're getting riled up, and one of the ways, and for those listening that are not science geeks like myself, one of the ways that we get into this fight, flight, or freeze, right? The cortisol rises, we're like, angry, or we get riled up after a comment or a email or whatever, a troll. And versus when we're actually wanting to calm our nervous system down. So a really quick way to do that is, before you're going to react, before you're going to do something, before you go into the spiral thinking that this isn't going to work out, you can take your hand and just literally place it over your heart and remember to breathe. We can do it right now. Ready? Let's do one more. And this is just a somatic practice to just remind yourself that, okay, I've come a long way, and I know you're in there. I know you're flagging this down as a potential red flag, but I got you. I see you, and you don't have to come up anymore because I got this. I am going to sit in the suck. I am going to explore that, and I am going to see what else is still coming up and lean into that discomfort. And that's really what, there's two different types of emotional release practices in the book, similarly to what I just shared right now. But I'm curious to see, for the next 30 days, every time, put your hand over your heart and you're leaning into the suck.
Okay, you're on.
Cool.
I'll do it.
Cool.
I like to end the show the same way every time.
Oof.
But I add a twist to it every time, so that way people can't really prepare for it.
Okay.
If I was to slide my phone across the table and you could pick it up, on the other end was you 3 years from now, as you continue to build your practice and continue to go off in this new direction that you've gone off from dentistry now into helping people and becoming the best coach and mentor that you can become. What do you think yourself from three years from now would want you now to know about what's most important to getting to where she's going to go?
Yeah, I would say, Neeta, you got this. Remember to take time for yourself. And remember, there is 24 hours in the day, yet with each and every step of your evolution and each and every phase of life, there will be new and interesting moments of challenge, and lean into them, because that's the next step for you to explore your growth edge and what's next on the horizon.
Thank you so much for your time.
So good.
And besides that suck now what, where are the best places to find you and stay in touch and follow your journey?
Yeah, so Neeta Bhushan on IG, and I think that's the place where we have the most fun.
And you have the Brave Table podcast.
I do have the Brave Table. Yes, we drop episodes twice a week on Monday and Wednesday.
Holy shit. Wow.
And it's been so much fun. We'll have to have you on, Sam.
I would love to be on.
That'll be so fun.
Thank you so much.
This was amazing.
Thanks for listening to the How to Human podcast. If you like this episode, please join our community. Go to patreon.com/hellohuman or patreon.com/howtohuman. They go to the same place. You can join for any amount. You can join our community events that happen every Monday night for the most part. We're either reading a book together or working together on study halls where you get to bring a project and we just collaborate and spend time together, or we're just hanging out. It's a great community. It's growing. We're getting new members by the day. And with each new person that joins, it feels like, how could you ask for a better match for this little group? And maybe you're one of them. That's patreon.com/howtohuman to join our community. Of course, you can always help the show by sharing it with friends. If everybody shared the show, we would have no problem booking any guests we ever wanted to book. Our audience would be big enough. We could just get anybody we wanted. So if you really want to help the show, help it grow, share it with friends. And if nothing else, write us a review on iTunes. It's free to do, takes a couple minutes, and it's a very sweet little love letter I get to read as they come in. So those are the three best ways to help us and stay connected. I hope to see you at one of our community events on Monday night. And if not, we'll see you next time on the How to Human podcast. Have a great day.